Okay, I'd like to call this public caucus to order. Ms. Martindale, thank you for coming in. The reason we requested this basically is we're looking for an update on projects that the Scranton Redevelopment Authority has been working on in the past and what we're working on now and where we're going in the future. Like what properties have we sold through the city of Scranton, and I guess a big concern of mine is the blighted property review board. We started that perhaps a year ago, and it is not off the ground. So that I'm kind of disappointed in that. I really wanted to get into the neighborhoods and start the blight. If there's one concern I hear the most of, it's blighted properties, and everybody has one on their block. So that is a huge concern. I did bring the conservatorship project that I put together to the administration, and naturally they shared it with you, and we were going to start doing that. I believe we had picked out the first home that was part of it, but and then it just died. So I believe we need to move forward on that and hear from you. Is your microphone on? Just.
It is now.
Yes.
So I appreciate the opportunity to be able to come before you and just give you some updates on what the SRA is doing and different ideas that we have for remediating blight. There's a couple of tools that we have talked about at great lengths, conservatorship definitely being one of them. I'm happy to say that actually our solicitor for the Scranton Redevelopment Authority is presently drafting affidavits to present to Lackawanna County Court for that 25 New York Avenue parcel that we're looking to undertake under conservatorship. If you would remember, if you could recall when we met and discussed it in the past at our last vacant property review board committee meeting, we talked about this property being most ideal is because we could not get a hold of the owner. There didn't seem to be a responding owner of note to kind of take the charge up with. Since then, there's some title searches and some discovery, we've learned that the owner has has 2 active mortgages on that parcel that are actually in good standing, actually, as of my last update from the bank that he is receiving those mortgages from. And part of the legislature for conservatorships means that you have to give the most senior non-governmental lien holder the right to be the conservator of the property, pushing it forth. I don't think that the bank has any interest in doing that. But what they do have interest in doing is making sure and doing their due diligence to see if they can get the property owner to set the property back to rights, because he's actually current on those 2 mortgages. So he's considered a good loan, just a bad actor communally. That does not stop our presentation to the courts. We just need to ensure that, and I'm trying to get actually in writing, that they are okay with the Scranton Redevelopment Authority serving as the conservator for that parcel. It strengthens our case, it strengthens our ask. So that is currently what we're waiting on. That email chain occurred between myself and Wells Fargo Bank. This is the bank that owns the liens, by the way, just this week, actually. So we look forward to that process moving on. In the meantime, and in the interim, I did send out an email, and I had a few responses on dates and times so that we can decide whether or not we are going to talk eminent domain or we're going to talk conservatorship. So eminent domain has different rules for our committee meeting. It requires me to advertise that meeting. It requires me to open that meeting up to the public, absolutely. And it requires us to kind of have a plan on the procedures of articles of taken. But the consensus of the group—
Domain, though, it's easier for someone to sue us with an eminent domain, right?
That is correct.
So that to me is, it's a tough way to go. But if that's all we have, that's all we have.
Well, so it's expensive, and the success rate with them in our region are not great. It's a long, drawn-out, expensive process. We're trailblazing this conservatorship, so to speak, because there's odds of being able to recoup our losses should the owner decide to set the property back to rights, and it allows for right of ownership, which is important, I think, to the group as a whole. Conservatorships is a very, 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 as you well know, it's a not common thing done. I think it's a cool thing that Scranton is one of the first in our closest regions, actually, that is undertaking it. But our solicitor is doing a great job at digging in and trying to meet out all of the hindrances that can come along before they come along to make this an administratively not heavy or expensive overhaul, and so that we're putting that funding where it belongs into remediating the blight on the property. We're also currently looking to see if we can find ways to access that property, because one of the things that we do need in our filing affidavit is we need to be able to explain what the condition is internally, and if this is something that's going to be demolition, but this is all the part of the procedures and the steps that we're taking to making sure that the process works out well. I think it's important for the city to have...
One second.
Yes.
Excuse me. You're echoing back there, and we can't hear. Thank you.
I appreciate
Sorry.
it. I appreciate it. Yeah, so I'm thinking that, I'm sorry, I just lost my train of thought ever so briefly, but that's okay, it'll come back quick enough. I think one of the things that we're looking to set a successful benchmark program in conservatorships. I think the Vacant Property Review Board Committee is important for the city to have. It's a tool, especially for those properties that eminent domain is the only possibility to go after, but that, I think, should be the last of our processes in remediating the blight. I hope to see a successful conservatorship with 25. I have another property that I'm proposing for a second conservatorship, something that we can discuss further and decide if it's appropriate for me to utilize that funding for that process. We're thinking if we get one good one and then certainly a second good one, it'll be a process that becomes seamless to the city within time.
So do you have a date for the next meeting for the...
I have 3 dates that I proposed through October 9th for our group to meet. 3 p.m. Mondays, so every Monday successive after the 23rd through the 9th for our board, for our committee.
Get that, Mr. Voldenberg, get that information so we can contact everyone. And the soonest, I'd like the soonest date so we can get moving on this.
So 25 New York Street, this is the first instance of conservatorship in the city.
Yes.
Even with those 2 good mortgages, we're still identifying this one as, this one's our test case, this is our pilot case.
We were not happy about those 2 mortgages when we learned about them through the title search. We were hoping that it would be a clear, straight run forward. It was a challenge, but the legislature does not prohibit us from pursuing because of the mortgages, because ultimately the goal is to remediate the blight, and it is, I mean, you can't even see there's a house there unless you kind of dig through the foliage and climb over it to get into it. And I think that it's an attractive nuisance. It's certainly a fire hazard. So all of these things will be listing in our affidavit to gain some control, site control, so that we can remediate and assess whether or not it should be demoed or if it can be salvaged and rehabbed. It's a Redevelopment Authority's dream to rehabilitate blighted properties rather than tear them down, but this, depending on the level of rot that's inside, will determine that in the end.
Most of your budget currently is from ARPA funds, correct?
That is correct.
And this one, I know there was some discussion, the city did allocate $400,000 to blight abatement. With this particular property, you're looking to get into that $400,000 for blight abatement due to conservatorship on 25 New York?
Absolutely.
Okay. About how much ARPA funds does the SRA have currently?
So currently, the SRA is holding $625,000 in ARPA funds. Roughly 250 of that is to be allocated within the next couple of weeks on projects for preservation in the North Scranton area.
Yeah, I saw there was several with the ACE group. There was 3 properties, Wayne Ave, somewhere else. It was like 120 for 2 and maybe another 100. Are you going to be allocating the full funding for those 3 properties?
We're going to be allocating funding for ACE's Wayne Avenue property, which is $125K. We can't do all of them because some of them the city of Scranton is undertaking. It would be duplication of funding.
Okay. You're also allocating funding to and this is going to jump topics, but the Hilltop Heights project.
Yes.
Are you allocating the full $200,000 to that project as well?
So as I know, it is $300,000 coming from the city of Scranton for that project, but the Redevelopment Authority will serve as a pass-through for that funding, allowing them to be able to utilize the bulk of that funding for the rehabilitative work they're doing there.
So that $200,000 isn't coming from SRA funds, it's coming from the city of Scranton through the SRA as a pass-through?
The SRA is a pass-through, similar to the Scranton Square project. We also did the same service for Quandale for that project.
When we're talking, I'm going to ask you just to give an overview or an update on the North Scranton project, but some of the other addresses in North Scranton that you were looking at were smaller lots. One was 102 East Market Street was one. It was an old firehouse at one time. 724 West Market Street, and then there was 2 properties on Parker Street. What are you looking to do with those lots?
So you named 102 East Market Street, which is a highlight. That actually is a project that we're looking to try to acquire. Now, I did have engagement with the owner of the building, and they are interested in selling, but the price that they're interested in selling it
higher
for
than demo.
is outlandish. So that is a property that I was hoping to discuss at our next conservatorship meeting.
When we're looking at these properties, so I feel like 2 of these properties possibly are empty lots. One is the fire hall. Are you going to rehab that property, or that one's too far gone, we're going to raise the property and then do some other development on it, or what's the end goal with those properties?
So you gave the addresses, and do forgive me for not remembering whether or not those particular parcels that you noted are in the floodplain or not. But what we did was we identified a number of the parcels in North Scranton, and we're packaging them up for an RFI to be released shortly to gain or garner interest from possible developers to develop scattered site development throughout the North Scranton area, and actually throughout Scranton, but with a highlight on North Scranton.
Yeah. None of the properties I mentioned would be in the floodplain. I just worried about the lot size. I didn't know if the lot size was going to be large enough to put structures in.
Originally and initially, after the North Scranton plan was completed, one of my roles I was tasked with was, with help from city staff, was reviewing some of the vacant parcels that are throughout North Scranton and trying to figure out their viability. And what we did is we listed all of them, sent them out to a couple of our local developers to see if they had any interest in developing them. And the response was similar to what you just stated, that a lot of them are really, really small and really narrow. What we do know is that all we need is 3,000 square feet to legally put a structure on it, but it would make the unit incredibly small, and it would make, it definitely would serve for density for sure, but it would make it's not a developer's dream. So we're hoping to package some of these smaller scattered lots with some of the more larger, the really solidly developable ones, and try to gain some interest from developers that are within our, certainly locally, but at least within the region.
Yeah. With that being said, at one point in time, we were talking about streetscape projects in each part of the city, and originally North Scranton had the Providence Corners streetscape, I think was the name of that. It was decided maybe because half of it was only in the right census tract that we were going to move in a different direction. So the North Scranton plan is the different direction from that streetscape project, correct?
Yes, it is. So we did talk about some streetscapes, and that is being kind of broken down into committee groups within what's called an Elm Street designation, which is one of the initiatives that the Scranton Redevelopment Authority is undertaking for the North Scranton area, which was kind of advised of as of the North Scranton plan. I would love to put some ARPA dollars behind streetscapes there, but I have 2 hindrances. I can't do the full street because of that census tract roadblock, and some of those streets, some of those corners are owned by PennDOT, which is not going to say it's not a lift that we are willing to undertake, but it is a heavy lift to undertake when you're looking to remediate streetscapes on PennDOT managed roads.
Okay, but you're saying, yeah, was the original amount of ARPA funding around 900,000?
Yes, it
And at
was.
this point in time, there's about 630,000 left? Okay. So for that North Scranton plan, there was a study. Was the study completed?
The study is completed. The study has been completed as of February this year.
Okay. Can you kind of give us a rundown from completion of the study to what we're going to see in North Scranton?
Absolutely. So North Scranton is my pleasure to talk about. It's an area I'm slowly but surely leaching myself into and getting to know the demography, getting to know the constituency that reside there, the different small businesses, residents, restaurants and residents and such of the like. The biggest lift for the North Scranton plan was community engagement and figuring out funding streams and funding sources to help bridge some of those funding gaps that they were experiencing there. And the Elm Street designation was identified as the highlight of that kind of a movement. What it allows for the community to kind of decide how the funding is going to be dispensed there and what kind of funding we can curate from the state, from DCED in particular. I've been in meetings, multiple meetings with Paul McNoskey, who is helping me arrange that designation at present. At this moment, at this time, what we're doing is we're forging a MOU agreement with the unit that would be responsible for spearheading that Elm Street designation.
And that's United Neighborhood Centers, correct?
We identified United Neighborhood Centers as that group. So the MOU is being worked out with our solicitor and that agency at this time. What it would allow for them to do is it would allow for them to continue to develop and to continue to plan, to identify the 4 core components of having an Elm Street designation. Continuing community engagement, allowing that neighborhood to be the voice of what changes and all of the different things that happens in that neighborhood. So our businesses, our residents, we're talking streetscapes, we're talking economic development, we're talking housing rehab, and we're talking like facade programs and things to spruce it up and make it prettier. One of the core things that were identified in that North Scranton plan was the inability for some of the patrons and some of the citizens that live in the area to age in place. I had people come up to me at one of our community engagement meetings and explain that they can't leave their house in the wintertime if they slip, So out of that, what we're looking to also do is develop a housing rehabilitation program for the aging in that area to be administered by NeighborWorks. And that is to complement that Elm Street designation as well. So I have $125,000 in funds that I'm looking to allocate towards that initiative, strictly for aging rehabilitative programs to help with some of the things that might be going wrong with their home, but certainly to help with accessibility issues.
So UNC, it's $52,000 for UNC you're completing that MOU for UNC to do the Elm Street designation, and then it's another 100, that's ARPA funding, correct?
That is ARPA funding.
And then NeighborWorks, we're going to pay NeighborWorks $125,000 for an aging in place program that NeighborWorks is going to run.
And it's in complement to the Elm Street designation, because this is also one of the core factors of this designation is to help the aging demography in that North Scranton area. So those are 2 really big programs outside of the assistance with ACE, who's also doing great work in the area, and chiming in on their rehabilitative programs where we can.
Yeah. With that Elm Street designation, about how long, do we know the timeline on how long that's going to take, or what the usual timeline is?
So Paul McNoskey said my timeline was very reasonable. He said for startup and kickoff, about 6 months, a year before we start seeing funding pool in from that designation. From the time that application is submitted. We're hoping to get that application submitted and finalized before the end of October.
Okay. When it comes to those, the lots that you're going to get in North Scranton and other places around the city, are realtors involved with those lots, or what's the process of obtaining those lots? I know some of them are land banks, but land bank properties, but others are owned by individuals who are attempting to sell them at this point?
At this time, we are strictly courting the land bank for repository properties as well as properties that they have on their own listing.
when it comes to funding sources, right? So at this point, we talked about ARPA funds. A majority of SRA is ARPA funds. You had about $900,000. You're down to about $600,000. It was hard finding properties that SRA sold. So in the last 3 years, it appears that only 2 properties were sold. One was on Lackawanna Avenue, and the other was on Lloyd Street in North Scranton. Is there any other types of funding? I know there's some there's some PennDOT rights-of-ways that are bringing in maybe $5,000 here, $1,000 there. But what other types of funding other than the ARPA funds is the SRA bringing in?
So we are on a lean budget. You've mentioned a lot of the right-of-way fundings, any funding that we can garner from serving as an administrator for any programs such as pass-through type of situations is where some of the funding is going through. Originally, we were hoping to hub that Elm Street designation, but in order to do that, we would have had to develop a nonprofit for that, because that would have been another way to curate administrative dollars. Right now, it's just, we're also reviewing and looking at the possibility of community lending banks, so CRI dollars from the banking institutions. We've been courting CDFIs and the possibility of bringing CDFI to the Scranton area for quite some time. The talks have stalemated a bit, hoping to reinvigorate them before the end of year. Because I think that is probably an underestimated viable avenue for funding bridges, especially with the disparities that we might see with the Fed going forward.
Shaquera, I see we have legislation before us this evening to convey a small parcel of property over on 110 West Market Street to the Redevelopment Authority. It's my understanding it's not a huge piece of property, but is it in the resolution, or at least with the memorandum, the backup, it says that the Redevelopment Authority plans to then go and sell that property to get it back in the tax rolls. Is that something you foresee happening pretty quickly?
Well, that's my hope. I know that it's desired by the 2 businesses on either side of that parcel. It's gone such a long time without it necessarily being addressed. I don't know how quickly that turnover. I will enter that RFI, and submit that into open.gov as quickly as possible. What the interest will lie on how much marketing I'm allowed to do on that parcel.
Right.
What avenues I can take. Do we want to curate a realtor to help disposition that parcel?
Well, if there's 2 interested parties, as one of 5 council individuals here, I would love to see that thing turned around pretty quickly, because the quicker we can get that back in the tax rolls, number one, the better off for the city, because we're going to have more property on the tax rolls, number one. Number 2, it eliminates liability for the Redevelopment Authority in the city as quickly as possible. And it sounds like from what you said, there's at least two properties or 2 vendors or whatever, or property owners that are interested. So I would think it wouldn't take a lot of time to, I'm sure the property's been assessed, to get the thing up for sale, and let's get rid of it.
I would hope not. We're happy to put it up and get it and get it off the city, get it off the city's liability list, certainly off of our liability list once we undertake it within the short term. And our hope is to make everyone involved with that sale as happy as possible.
Sure.
Shaquera, that's first class like a white out. Only be 2 people interested in it because it's landlocked.
Right.
It's landlocked, so the only one who could benefit are them 2 entities. So that should be a quick, who's going to pay the most for the most part.
That's really what it kind of comes down to. We've not confronted either owner of the adjoining parcels yet. We're waiting for the city to allow us that access, and then we discussed the possibility of utilizing our realtor for that particular parcel. He's also located in North Scranton.
The quicker the better for everybody.
We like quick and better.
Yes, thank you.
At this point in time, I had a list of properties. How many properties does the SRA own?
Off the top of my head, I printed out a list for everyone just in case. Roughly 53, many of which are undevelopable sliver lots, or high-reach lots, or heavily wooded lots, or utility corridors. So they're not, one thing that we did discover over the last year and a half about our parcels is that they're not the most desired of parcels. They're just something that we kind of hold in keeping. A lot of the times we provide
They're usually desirable
easements.
to the person that lives adjacent to it, which is a plus as well.
Some of them, there's been some cases and some discussion on some smaller lots. We have not gained an owner, an adjacent property owner that would be interested in making their parcel bigger as of yet, but that is also very much a possibility. One thing we have gotten a lot of interest from some of these really undevelopable random lots like Cedar Ave. There was a parcel over there somewhere on North Main, utility companies, and PennDOT. PennDOT actually bought one of them just out of ease for having to keep coming back to us for those easement agreements.
I agree with Mr. Schuster. If you have 53, the majority of which, as you say, are unusable in terms of, you said something about 3,000 square feet required if somebody wanted to build a small home or what have you. I would think it'd be advantageous to contact the property owners adjacent to those properties and just see if there's any interest in, start getting rid of some of them.
Yeah, no,
Get
that's,
them on the tax rolls.
everything is always to get them back on the tax rolls. That's paramount for sure. One of the things that we did do is anything that could be even a semblance of developable is we're adding them to the group of properties that we're putting out for bid. To see if we can lure in some of these savvy developers to help that's interested in developing scattered site locations.
Well, the other benefit too is if I'm a property owner and I live next to this small quirky piece of land that, as you said, really couldn't be developed, I'd prefer to try to pick it up, try to buy it at a reasonable price, and then I would then be responsible for taking care of it, and it helps eliminate blight. If nothing else, even if they can't use it, I don't know, maybe they can park a car on it. Maybe they could do something, gets a car off the street. But more importantly, typical homeowners, most responsible homeowners, don't want blight next to them. Here, the worst thing that drives people crazy, they take care of their property. Say there's 10 property owners, 8 of them are taking care of their property, and there's 2 where, it looks like Sanford Son. They're just loaded up with garbage or whatever. Or weeds or overgrown. But most responsible property owners, I know in this city, would prefer, if there's a small piece there, they'd prefer the opportunity to try to own that piece of property. Then they can take care of it, and at least it doesn't have a negative impact on their property, and they can clean it up. So,
I agree, and I just want to make another point. So I totally agree with both Councilman Schuster and Councilman King, but if there's, close to 50 that are undevelopable, but maybe the neighbor doesn't even know how to even go about acquiring this lot. Not knowing who still owns it, not even knowing that you're in possession of it. I think that dialogue needs to start. And of course, they'd go back on the tax rolls, but if they get purchase that, I don't think we need to hammer them. With a huge reassessment, like, we'll sell it to you for a couple bucks, but your taxes are going to go up 40%. Like, I just think there has to be some really good dialogue, and it has to be good for everybody. But I don't know for sure, but I drive around the city and I see parcels like that, and I'm like, I don't know who owns it. I don't know if the neighbor, even if I don't know who owns it, I don't know if the neighbor actually knows how, even if they can even attain that property.
Yeah. So that, I think that's definitely a fair action. It allows for more engagement with the homeowners within the city. Our properties are not just in North Scranton; they're throughout the entire city. I'm not opposed to engaging with homeowners to inquire and see. I can maybe get on the phone with Ralph and see how he does it, because I know he does that quite often with land bank properties. So if we're talking about a mode of action, and market our properties and see what homeowners might be interested in enlarging their property, I know, in my mind, off the top of my head, I'd likely be interested in something like that. It's worthwhile to see assess what properties here might be viable for that type of option. I would just ask that in the interim, while we're doing that, that I spare the properties that are being identified for the possibility of future development in the North Scranton area in particular.
Well, you could create a list of those properties that you want, and perhaps do something like our zoning board does. Print out information on the property, let the people know it's for sale, the ones that we would like to move to the neighbors, and go up and put it on the poles, put it on the trees. As soon as you do something like that, people will come out and read that stuff.
Not opposed to that.
Instead of, you know, I don't see putting it in paper and spending thousands of dollars to advertise something we're going to get $500 for isn't wise, but perhaps marking it like our zoning board does, and maybe even work with our zoning board to go out to those, you know, the ones that we don't see that are developable.
So the ones in North Scranton, I mean, we already have several properties in North Scranton, probably, I'd say 10 to 15 that I could see on the list. The ones that I mentioned earlier are properties we're attempting to acquire, correct, as part of that, the North Scranton?
That is correct.
Okay. Right now, we know of the two properties that were sold in the last, say, 3 years, one on Lackawanna Ave, which was a similar situation where two individuals wanted a piece of property to expand their lots. Do we have anything else that's pending right now? I know there was a lot of talk about that Grossman property. I'm not really sure where that property is located.
So that property is being worked through our solicitor. That was an incomplete eminent domain.
Okay.
So it stopped at 2007. So we are looking for a buyer to accept that deed with no contest. So a no contest deed, so to speak, is probably the only way we would be able to disposition that lot. Because even though we're listed as the owner of record, we have no deed that says that, and there's nothing that's been generated from the court.
So the city is considered owner of record, but we just don't have...
That is correct. So
Official ownership.
currently, that's actually one of our solicitor's tasks right now, is closing the loop on that open eminent domain.
Okay. I know one of the other ones that's on your list, and you guys were working through it, was at 1506 Vine Street.
So 1506 Vine Street was set, and it was actually under contract this year. That deal fell through when the zoning board did not approve the specifications that were submitted by that developer. It was a lesser-known developer, I believe, in the Stroudsburg area, and I don't believe that what they presented to the zoning board met what they needed to have happen, and so they walked away from the deal.
Gotcha. Now, in looking at the discussions, that developer still owes SRA. I was looking at those revenue sources. I'm trying to find out what's your revenue source. They still owe $5,000 to us.
They do still owe us $5,000.
How do we acquire that?
So there was an invoice generated and submitted to them. What future action the board might take is up to them. Upon non-remittance, we can certainly go after it, but we don't know if it's going to cost us more to engage our solicitor's time for that than to just have it as an open debt on the books.
Okay. There was actually three more pieces that I wanted to ask you about. One was Hilltop Heights. I know SRA is running Hilltop Heights. Could you give us an update on that project?
We are still waiting for final paperwork from the solicitors at Quandel. Last we heard, there was a PHFA approval. There was an edit approval on the documents, but we have not received any of the execution documents. We have the drafts, but nothing to execute. We were expecting that as far back as June. We had an update that it would occur in July. I did submit for another update. I have not heard back yet from their solicitor. So we're still waiting on them for the paperwork. We're ready.
And SRA did commit $200,000?
No, we committed to be the pass-through from funding that is being seeded through the city of Scranton.
Thank you. There was a gateway project, so along North Main Avenue, coming into Euclid Avenue at the border of West Scranton and North Scranton. It's like the gateway to Trip Park, that area there. There was a project that I believe you were running to put a welcome sign, whether it was welcome to West Scranton, whether it was West Scranton and North Scranton at that property, but do you know where you are in terms of completing that?
So that is going to be a part of the Elm Street designation as well. So having signs that identify the different areas throughout Scranton is one of the things that we're looking to undertake. For North Scranton, UNC has a couple of Elm Street designations, but that's something that will go, a signage letting you know that you are in that region is a part of the designation streetscapes.
Okay, at one point I was told that there may have been state funding that was dedicated to those signs. We still have that state funding, we're not at risk to lose that?
I am not sure that we have that state funding or acquired that state funding. At least that's not paperwork that has come across my desk at any point. As I understand it, that is funding that we would be pursuing under the designation.
Okay, all right, that's good to know. When it comes to bonds, SRA does have 2 bonds. We're paying our debt services on those bonds. How is that, the
So
finances?
debt service is handled typically through the city, as I understand it. There's a fund set up for that thing, and I do know that we are not delinquent on it.
Say that one more time.
Debt service is being managed through the city of Scranton, through the business administrator.
Okay. And then you guys have a copy of annual budget, your audited financial statements, et cetera?
Absolutely.
Can council get a copy of those?
Absolutely.
Thank
It's
you.
public record.
Thank you. That may be all from me.
Thank you. Anyone else have questions? Well, we have a few minutes left, Ms. Martindale. Any highlights or anything you would like to share with us?
I would like to say that Scranton is a different archetype. It was interesting getting to learn the region, learn the patrons, learn the people, learn the culture, most importantly, the melting pot that it is. I think that the Redevelopment Authority, with its directors and its board, who very much care about the area that they live in, is primed and prized to be a real resourceful tool for the revitalization of the Scranton city. There are challenges, most certainly funding being the highlight of those challenges, but there's also people that are dedicated to doing the work performed and doesn't mind going to the street and meeting face-to-face with the people and the patrons. I think that when I first went into the North Scranton area, I was met with a mild apprehension is what I'm going to call it, and as of current, it's a much more warmer environment, welcoming, open, and people that honestly are just glad to have a group of people focused on their revitalization, that they are not the forgotten ones. So I want to say that for me, the Scranton Redevelopment Authority would represent those that might feel like they've been forgotten, but they're not.
All right, great. Well, thank you for coming, answering our questions, and I hope we get moving on that Blight Review Committee as soon as possible.
I know you enjoy a Blight Review
I
Committee
certainly
board
do.
meeting, Councilman Schmurl, so we look to get that scheduled in the short term. In the meantime, I did forward a copy of my really small presentation, just kind of highlighting some of the notes that we discussed here today. We didn't get to see it on the wall, but I did forward it on to Frank.
Yes.
And you'll have that in your possession.
Great, Frank will get us. Thank you very
so
much.
much for the time. I appreciate you, gentlemen and ladies.
All right, we will adjourn and be back in a few minutes for our regular meeting.
You're very welcome.